Welcome to HR Masters, a podcast where we sit down and talk about key learnings and best practices with the masters of human resources. Find us through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Now sit back, turn it up, and get ready to get your masters in HR with our host, Jordi Romero.
Welcome to today's episode to HR Masters. Today we have Mark McDermott as guest. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Pleasure to join you today.
He's joining us from London, right?
Yep, absolutely. Sunny today, usually not, but yeah, it's a nice spring day in London here.
Happy to hear. I mean, it's nice and spring day here as well, but I guess, we get a lot more of those. So anyway, stop of rubbing this in your face. Thanks for joining us. Mark is our first guest in the HR Master series who is not an active HR professional. Mark's actually a business owner and CEO. But I'll just let you introduce yourself. So Mark, tell us a little bit, who you are and how did you get here?
Cool. Well, yeah, so my name is Mark McDermott. I'm currently the CEO of ScreenCloud, which is a SaaS platform which helps people control screens in public environments. So there could be shops or schools or from HR, I suppose, internal communications is a big part. So we're a large platform, 6,000 customers growing quickly. And we have teams across the world in America, Los Angeles, in the UK, we have London and Belfast, and in Thailand, we have an engineering team there as well in Bangkok. My background is, I'm equally unqualified for my current job as I am for HR, I suppose. I studied humanities, art, history, and English literature is my ultimate background. Did a degree in history, but I've always been a bit of a nerd, I suppose, and played with computers a lot when I was in my teenage years, and then got into the internet fairly early and developed a love for IT. When I graduated, it was around the millennium, and a lot of recruitment was going on in the IT sector, trying to get non-IT professionals into IT to bridge that gap between technology and like business objectives, and I kind of sit in the middle. And to be honest, that's basically been my career, is trying to make both worlds happy, which isn't so easy, but hence why I have a job. And I worked for PwC initially, doing IT consulting. I worked on large scale projects in the mobile sector. They sold my division to IBM, and I got made redundant, which is actually a very good thing. Helped me buy the flat, which I'm actually still sat in 17 years later. And then I moved into agency world. I worked for a mid-sized agency in London, doing design and development, digital projects for kind of large corporate customers. Have a few interesting HR stories about that time there. Had a bit of a interesting boss. It was quite a toxic environment, actually. And funny enough, that's where I met my two co-founders, David and Luke. And in 2004, we started an agency. We basically all left because we kind of couldn't take it anymore, and started our own thing. We organically grew the agency, which I think is how most of those businesses go, and did reasonably well, got up to about 30 people. And then around the time of the financial crisis, we had sort of started to kind of, although it was going well, we were never going to be a big agency. So we started to develop products, and between 2009, 10 to present day, we developed products as well as running an agency. And of those products, ScreenCloud was the biggest. We raised money and we sold everything else, and now all we do is ScreenCloud. So is that very strange, long-winded way of saying who I am?
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing your story with us. So you're currently the CEO and founder of ScreenCloud. How many people do you have in the team?
So today we have 52 people, and we expect that number to rise to around 80 or 90, probably by the end of the year.
Okay, that's quite rapid growth. And you're sitting at your home right now, you said.
Yes, today I'm doing a work from home day. We have a very flexible culture at ScreenCloud. So basically we don't track whether people are in or out of the office. our customers are all over the world, and in different sectors. Like if you're in a hospitality retail sector, the weekend is a really big deal. But if you're in corporate communications, then obviously it's midweek. So it never ends, which in many ways some people might feel is like a bit of a nightmare. For me, it's actually it creates freedom, because you dip in and out as you wish. And we don't really subscribe to the idea of a working normal day. It's just you work when it's the right time, and then you can go and do other things. And we're very flexible in that regard.
That's a topic that tends to be very clear from a founder's perspective, but that sometimes finds some friction from HR, precisely, because there is sometimes even legal consequences of not respecting the rules of standard, old century rules.
That is true, yes. For example, unlimited holiday policy, which is, I think, a really big sticking point. I think we currently have that policy. I imagine we'll probably need to change it, because contractually we still have to put, in the UK, 20 days, I believe, is the minimum into it. And that gets confusing, because people are like, well, I have unlimited, but it says 20 days. And then also there's the classic problem, I'm sure you've discussed this before, of people not taking enough holiday, or it being a bit kind of seen as a bad thing, rather than the policy's there to be empowering and to give freedom. But in many ways, I find it can be a bit restrictive. So I think we probably will revise that policy, but not because we want to have tricked people into, hey, you've got all the freedom, but now we're taking it away, but more to actually just to try and make people's lives better and more stressful and less confusing.
Absolutely. So I think it's interesting to have you on board for today's podcast, because you're going to bring a different perspective. We usually talk to HR professionals, and we want to make sure that people who are listening to us, which is mostly fellow HR professionals, also have the perspective of this business owner / CEO role. I think you've had quite an interesting set of experiences where things that where probably lack of HR policies or lack of HR knowledge turn out in a big mess, a disaster, or a fun adventure, at least for your business. Do you want to share with us some of the things that happened to you for not doing HR or not doing more HR?
Yeah, well, obviously I've been employing people since 2004, so that's a reasonably long time. And for the vast majority of that period, even almost to now, I've never had an HR department. The only real HR investment we've done in terms of actually hiring people for the role has probably just been in working with recruiters, which obviously, that's one part, and really administration, just to kind of getting things done, but beyond that, we've all done it ourselves. Until recently, we've just hired a head of people, but we can come to that. But in my experience, I probably employed over 350 people, I guess, in my time. As I said, that there'll be many, many more interviews that I've done, and I think HR also doesn't just end with the people that you employ. It's also how those people then deal with your customers. And I've had HR issues where it's between a customer falling out with one of my people. So I kind of think it extends beyond your own farm, if you like. And as you would expect, and as any HR professional listening or watching will know, when you're dealing with people, random things happen. In fact, what I've now realized is nothing's really random. It's going to come, it's going to be there. But we've had everything from sexual harassment claims between two co-workers. That was a tough one. We've had to make redundancies during the financial crisis. I've had to fire people, obviously, who haven't worked out. I've even had a bookkeeper steal from us around £60,000, which is when we were a bootstrapped agency. We basically couldn't make payroll because of that. That was horrible. Yeah, really horrible. And actually had to get the police in and take her through court, and that was a lengthy process.
So tell us a little bit more about, what do you think, or what did you learn afterwards? How do you avoid some of those situations with HR?
Well, I think given everything that's happened over the years, I believe that, so I kind of believe you can look at these things two ways, right? So as bad things happen to you, or as experiences happen to you, you can try and keep blocking them by going, oh, okay, that happened. Let's create a policy for this, or let's create a policy for that. And suddenly you end up with this like biblical tomb of documentation, which is allegedly going to protect you from people doing what people do. If anything, I've gone the other way and actually think that doesn't really solve the issue. People are going to do what they're going to do. What you need to be clear on is your values and what you will and won't stand for. And I think that needs to be understood by everybody, regardless, and also, not just in your own language, but also internationally too. So if anything, I believe that HR policies should become simpler and reside more responsibility with the individual to look at their own behavior, their own actions, and to determine in advance what would Mark say, or what would the founders say, or what is the ScreenCloud way of doing this and dealing with this. I'm quite a big believer in that, because there's just so many random things that can happen. I just don't think you can policy your way to protection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell somebody's experience by the amount of clauses or pages a contract has. The more mistakes you've done in your life, and the more bad experiences you've had, like, you tend to have your lawyers add more and more paperwork to it. That doesn't just fix anything, because usually new problems occur and they're not taken care of in the paperwork. But so you say the way to go is to use the company's values, right, or leverage the company's culture to avoid these issues. You said somebody stole money. An accountant actually stole money from the company, and the accountant is usually the police of this kind of stuff happening or not happening from a company. So what did you do? Like, how did you figure out that somebody stole money from the company?
Well, I mean, she did it over a period of time, over about a year. I mean, it's actually very, very painful, because it was actually happening during the financial crisis. And at that time, we also had to make really good people redundant. And that was horrible. There was no reason. We didn't want to make them redundant. The company was still doing well. But, the reality was, everything was a bit in the shit at that time. And what was really so horrible about it is, the whole team had really bonded together during this moment, and we were working through it, and we had a plan. And then she just decided to just kind of take money every month, just a small amount. And what she would do is, she would transfer the money, but in the accounting, I mean, it might be easier to track these days, but this was, about 10 years ago. She would just call it like HMRC payment or VAT payment or freelancer, small, 300, 400 here and there. And it just grew and grew and grew. And at the time, we had been successful, and we had money in the bank. We'd always been quite conservative with cash flow, and we had saved money. So we were going through our savings a bit during that time to try and survive. And so it didn't become immediately obvious, because the money was there. Anyway, effectively, after about a year of this, she started to get greedy and take more. And we actually sacked her already, because we weren't getting good enough management accounts. Well, guess why? So we'd already got rid of her and actually pulled someone in who was better. And then suddenly we tried to do payroll one month, and we couldn't do it. But the management account said that there was cash to do it. We could only pay half the staff. And that's the first time we've ever not made payroll in our entire career. And it took about a week, because the penny slowly drops, and we figured it out by painstakingly going through all the paper. I mean, everything was printed out. It was a bit of a SME. It wasn't well structured. I mean, there's a lot of lessons in all of this. And eventually we had to go to the police and have her arrested and prosecuted. And it turns out she'd actually done it before, but under a different name. And we actually knew she had a different name, because we had done an ID check, but she said it was from a marriage. And, as soon as it kind of became a relationship-oriented thing, we sort of went, okay, fine. Well, actually, that was just lies. Yeah. So, it was a very, very tough experience, and actually getting her prosecuted wasn't easy. We had to really pressure the police to go through with it. The police in the UK don't really care about low-level white-collar crime. They're more interested in the more statistical things, real crimes, which I guess is true. But then, you know what? It's a real crime to deny a company of jobs, and most countries seem to care about job growth. Well, small businesses shouldn't be stolen from. So.
Yeah, if you can't afford to pay your employees for a month because somebody's stealing from the bank account, that has a real impact in people's livelihood. So eventually, happy ending. Did you get the money back? Did you manage to pay everybody eventually?
Yes, thankfully, we had been good about getting proper levels of insurance. Actually, there's a kind of funny story there. I remember we had to get indemnity insurance because we were working with quite big customers like the BBC and Nestle and stuff. So you have to have indemnity insurance because we're working on their websites. So in theory, we could create a big loss for them, which is much more valuable than our company was. So we had these like expensive policies, otherwise we just couldn't work with these people. And funny enough, our insurance broker, who's actually a friend of David, who took the policy together for us, threw in this what is it, like loss clause, or I don't know the exact term, but I was kind of thinking at the time, why do we need that? I mean, all we've got is a few like PCs and stuff. I mean, what are you going to steal? We rent our office. There's not really anything to steal here. Well, he said, look, I'm just going to throw it in for free. And thank God he did, because that then kicked in. So we did actually manage to reclaim the money. Hiscox was the company we were working with, the large broker. And in fairness, once we'd proven it, they didn't need the police to do anything, and they paid it back. So we could pay everyone. But yeah, it was a pretty crazy time. Yeah, but there's some lessons learned there about, you know, thinking about what can happen in the future, what's likely or what's not likely. I mean, you're always better off just protecting yourself as best you can, just so that come that moment, you don't have that sinking feeling of this one act of malice could crush the company, which it could have done.
And probably, as we were saying earlier, you don't want to solve that by implementing a policy where you oversee everything that the accountant does every day and, monitor the bank movements and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking like micro payments. I mean, the whole point of having a bookkeeper and an accountant is that they take that admin away. You don't have to go through all of these things. That said, in ScreenCloud today, we do have checks and balances for all of this. And thankfully, there is good software now which can help explain the anomalies and things. So I think it's probably less of an issue, although I'd say for small companies, it's probably still quite a big thing that they don't think about. But you could try and make a whole policy about how not to be stolen from, but you're never gonna write it correctly.
I mean, there's another lesson, right? I don't know if you did background checks, not just an identity check, but actually calling former employers and asking about this person. My personal experience tells me that each time I didn't do a background check or a reference call, the likelihood of having an issue was a lot higher than when I did reference checks. I mean, I'm sure that depends on every country. Reference calls are, quite a standard in HR, but for sure they're delicate. There's a lot of GDPR compliance to take into account now as well. Like there's a lot of things you're not supposed to disclose. So I guess you need authorization from the employee. But in my case, even if what you said is true, people tend to just say good things. When a reference call is like, you have to hire this person, you're crazy if you don't hire this person, that means yes. When it's not like that, for me that's a clear no. Like people are nice and they don't want to, constrain, somebody's possibility to get a new job. But if they don't convince you like crazily to hire this person, for me that's, a pretty big red flag. But Yeah, there's a limit to what you wanna, you want or you can say about all the people you work with in your experience. So you mentioned a few horror stories, through your career that had some relationship to HR, and you also mentioned that culture is the cure, in your opinion, to most of them, right? You actually mentioned like the values of the company. So what's today's culture or values for ScreenCloud? What they're trying to transmit to your team, and how are you helping this culture propagate from the first 2, 3, 4 people to 40 and eventually 50, 90 people?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. We don't write them in paint on the wall. We don't confuse them with ping pong tables and beers on Friday. For me, culture is really, it's an attitude. It's culture, I think is kind of similar to how a family works together. For me, it's like I suppose, osmosis. It comes out, and it has to be truly authentic. If you go to anyone inside of ScreenCloud and you were to ask them, they may not use the same words as me, but I think they would talk to you with the same sincerity that I'm trying to convey to you now. That they would understand, when we can have a bit of fun, and then also, whoa, okay, let's just be sensible here, and we've got to listen to this customer. They have a serious issue. We can't just go, oh god, they're just nagging away. Like, there's pain here. They might not be saying the right words. They might not be giving us the right feedback.
Actually, I you know what I was thinking, Mark? Maybe when you listen to yourself, you listen to the podcast when it's up, you're going to notice you're using these words: trust, respect, sincerity, and so on. And you could probably just write them down and say, oh, those are our values. And I never wrote them down. And
quick, write it on the wall, But not to mock culture, but culture's talked about so much. There's a lot of pressure to define your culture very early. And there's also a lot of pressure to define the culture that you think people will want, not the culture you have. And I think that's very important. I was hiring in Belfast for a new engineering office. And we decided we were obviously going to start with a leader, a really, really strong leader who would then build a leadership team and then start to build out that team. And it's actually been phenomenally successful. I'm a huge fan of Northern Ireland. There's incredible talent there. Anyway, the mistake was in the job description. So what I always do is try and find people and then see what their failings, not their failings, but their natural weaknesses are. And the more senior you get, the more specialized you get. And actually what we ended up doing was hiring both of them. And I just said, look, the real mistake here is mine. I've written a job description for someone who doesn't exist. And I've just found 2 of the most perfect people I could ever have found. And I think you 2 make a phenomenal team. So instead of having 1 leader, we're going to have 2. And we did that, and it worked brilliantly. So I think hiring around people's weaknesses and being open about them is a big thing.
That's interesting. Everything that's around learnings in HR is interesting to our audience. You mentioned you just hired your first, let's say, real HR person, not somebody who's not just a recruiter or just an admin person to support you with all the paperwork and bureaucracy. What do you expect from this HR person? I mean, not what the job description says. What you actually deep down need this person to do successfully for ScreenCloud to be the company you want it to be.
So yes, it's interesting. So we've called the job role head of people. That's like saying in marketing, I've got someone who writes content and someone who does AdWords. They are totally different things. The types of characters. So the first thing I did is I said, well, what's the priority? And what I understand, and I'm still now on this journey. I'm now into unique ground. That we're over 50 people and going towards 100. I've never run a company of that size before. What I was informed was basically get someone in now, maybe just before you need it, although I think we kind of do need it now, to help you kind of codify and work through and anticipate the challenges of the future. And also to truly invest in someone who's there to help our current and future staff, not to help me, not to be my spy or anything negative like that, but to someone who's actually going to take these people who've given so much of their lives to us and actually invest more time in their development, their growth, especially as new teams and new roles emerge. And things like, a current challenge is, we've got some people, typically when you start, they tend to be kind of younger, less experienced people who come in quite generalists, because basically that's what you need. You want those people to succeed, but likewise, the company has to succeed too. So there's a whole load of different challenges. And so this person really, I've asked them really to do probably two main things initially. Well, let's say three. Firstly, come in and just check that everything we've done is right. I'm pretty sure, because we've done fundraising, our compliance and due diligence is okay, but maybe there's some problems with contracts. So sort out the admin, get the ship in order. Secondly, I would love us to design a world-class onboarding process from basically, I suppose, point of offer, just to give a start point, all the way through to maybe the first 6 months. And I had a lot of vision about how you can do that with technology, but also very human. And I would love us to be well known for that. So the onboarding process, and then thirdly, to codify what our future organizational structure looks like and identify where we have gaps, and then start to coach the people that we have internally that we think could, I'd always like to fill from within where possible. And so I always want to give our current people the best chance. And where that doesn't exist, then I want to bring in the best people externally and understand all of that. So yeah, that's quite a big job, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
you want to tell us about this onboarding story you were mentioning?
Okay, so I have a kind of almost peevish desire to put people slightly out of their comfort zone and just push people to get the most out of them. And so something I've always wanted to do and started a few months ago is something I call the employee challenge. So when you join ScreenCloud, we give you a device, so free piece of hardware, and you have to go and find a company or organization or anything, and you have to go and get them to agree to use ScreenCloud, give it for free, so you're not selling it as such. And for 3 months, you have to go in and implement a screen strategy for that customer. And then you have to report back, usually like a video presentation kind of thing on what you've learned, what went well, what went horribly wrong. And all. So this is like, I mean, everyone does this: developer, designer, marketing, finance, the whole lot. And everyone's reaction is absolute fear. And obviously, because I introduced this in the first week of them joining, maybe it is a little bit too much. But we, where people struggle to, usually what we've started to do is just kind of get a few ideas like, well, don't you know a friend of a friend who owns a bar or a little restaurant that could do, and we're going to give it away for free. So it's quite a good deal, really. But what I am doing is getting them right into the heart of our customer's problem, our customer's environment, and to build empathy and sympathy with that problem. Because I think in software development, especially when you, I guess you were probably the same. We have like 6,000 customers, and it's a mass market product in many ways. Obviously, our big customers, we know them very well, but the little ones, we know them from support, but don't really know them. I want people just to be close to the customer and also to see our own failings,
Interesting. I'll see if we can experiment with something similar, and I look forward to hearing what Kate says about this when she's on board.
Well, we did bring it up in the interview. I think she was very tactful, which is, I guess, what a good HR professional would do, and appreciated that I obviously have deep passion for this project and it's not going away, but also said, maybe we could, work on some of the supportive material to try and make this landing a bit softer rather than just go and find someone.
Make it less overwhelming. So Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you, but let's keep it down to one. What would you recommend, somebody who is, young in their career and, wants to get in HR, is starting to get in HR? What do you think from a business owner / CEO's perspective?
The big things which seem to be missing when I was exploring the market a bit, and not many people had this experience, was get international as soon as you can. So I found that not many people had genuine experience of working with sort of diverse teams, diverse cultures, and I would say that's the way that the world is clearly going. So get on that train. Because you're going to learn so much by how you deal with HR in Asia and Asian culture versus European and American. It's just totally different. So get experience of the globe. Also, it should be loads of fun. So that's nice. And then I think the other thing would be I would highly recommend building skills in career development and coaching. Looking at the future, the world is going to be rapidly changing. People are going to have to reinvent themselves several times in their career, I believe. And I think that's going to get even more quick. And as a result, companies do need to be very responsible for the future of their staff and making sure that although there's the needs of today that they're serving, that actually, we are thinking about what skills they've got so that they do have a career and a defensible job in the future. And I believe that really is something for HR to handle. So those would probably be my two things. I'm sure there's loads of others, but yeah, those would be the two things. And not worry so much about recruitment and stuff, because I think honestly, tools and AI, for want of a better word, is going to help find and sort. I think be more human, be more closer to people, understand the subtleties of culture internationally, and I think you are irreplaceable.
Okay, well, I think that's a good conclusion, and we'll have to leave it here. Unfortunately, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. The perspective of a business owner and CEO is something new for our podcast, so thank you very much.
And if anyone wants to reach out and discuss anything we've talked about, I love talking about these things, as you can probably tell. So my email is just mark@screen.cloud. So if they want to contact me, I'm happy to chat. And they want to hear more of the war stories, always happy to share.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your offer. And that was it for today. See you next week on the next episode of HR Masters.
If you like this, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to tune in next week to HR Masters.